let's talk about Manchester. And let me ask you, what is it? And our show made the decision, and we talked about it last night. We were not going to run endless loops of teenage girls screaming and running for the exits. We were not going to bring on experts to guess about what happened and what might happen, because we didn't even know until an hour and a half into this show that ISIS had claimed responsibility. So we're not going to glorify what the terrorists did, and we're not going to give them what they want. But let's ask a policymaker. What can we do as a country to stop a depraved human being from walking in to a concert filled with preteen and teenage girls and set off a bomb that blows them up?
Well, first, let me just say that as a mother and a grandmother, it takes my breath away to imagine the parents that were waiting outside of that venue for their child, assuming their child was safe and enjoying a rite of passage as a young person. And so really, really difficult. I will say I haven't been briefed yet, and I'm sure that we will today by the Department of Homeland Security. And so we don't know a lot yet about who this depraved person was, this person with no humanity in them. But we do know a couple of things. And one thing I want to compliment the president on was by going to Saudi Arabia first, he was sending a very clear signal that we need friends in the Arab world. We need Muslim friends. We need friends in the Muslim world. And I hope that since the president has sent that strong signal, he will come home and send the same signal to the American Muslim community. Because, Joe, we know for sure that the attacks we have had in the United States have been radicalized individuals. And individuals many times who are here as American citizens, who are here legally, but have been radicalized within the Muslim community. And it is, in fact, the peaceful, loving people that are Americans and also Muslim that can help us the most. And if the president would send the same signal to the American Muslim community that he sent in the Middle East, then I'm hopeful that might help in terms of us being able to capture people in this country who have, in fact, been radicalized.
So as far as law enforcement goes, and I have 2 older children and 2 younger children, the age of many of those people that were at the concert last night. So like you, this does hit home with me. But what do we do? Do we stop? I'm reminded of what Tom Friedman and others wrote after 9/11. Do we lock ourselves in our homes, or do we continue to go up? How much security does my teenage girl's friends, do they have to walk through when they're going to a concert? What does this change things for us?
Well, I think there's a fine line between us making sure we have adequate security and us changing the way we live in America. And I think we have to be careful and not give terrorists that victory. So I do think we've got to keep in mind that we have thwarted a number of these plots. We have a guy in prison in the United States serving a 40-year sentence that was originally arrested in the UK for plotting a terrorist attack on our subway system, and he originally was charged with plotting a mall attack in the UK, but they didn't have enough evidence there. But we got him in American courts, by the way, with American prosecutors. And so we've got to continue to augment our law enforcement capabilities in this area. We've got to continue to work on cyber in terms of our ability to find folks who are being radicalized. And we certainly need to welcome more people of Muslim faith into the fight in terms of people that are part of our effort, that are law enforcement officials, that are also Muslim Americans, because they have the ability to go places and do places in an undercover way, in an intelligence way that helps us gather information to catch people. I don't know that we can stop ever gathering in big public places. I mean, I just don't think that's the answer.
So, Senator, we have had more than a decade now of people and nations lining up in the supposed global war on terror. But here, as you've been speaking about this topic, we have a concerted attack on the poor in this country going on right now in this budget. I don't know anyone who would love to be born poor in America. So who's going to lead the fight in the United States Senate against this attack on the poor?
I think you're going to see a lot of people push back on this budget. And by the way, I anticipate that's going to be bipartisan. I don't think there's very many Republicans that have an appetite for getting rid of Meals on Wheels. I don't think there's very many Republicans. We just passed a big increase in research funding with the majority of the Republicans voting for it in the budget bill we just passed a few weeks ago. So I really don't think there's an appetite on either side of the aisle for this president's budget. I think it will have massive changes, as most presidents' budgets do, but it's telling that they thought this was a wise thing to tie around their neck, this budget, because there's an awful lot to talk about in this budget that I think is going to really get the attention of a lot of voters in my states and states across the country.
Senator, this is Charlie up in New York. I wanted to switch topics a bit to this new report from the Washington Post that the president asked the director of national intelligence and the director of the NSA to put pressure on the FBI to end the investigation into the Russia probe. And I'm wondering, so apparently both of those officials wrote down memos contemporaneously about those conversations and traded notes about them. So this adds to the pile of paper, along with whatever memos Director Comey wrote down about his various conversations with the president that apparently exist. And I'm wondering, as a Democrat in the Senate, do you think that Congress needs to see those memos? Do you think that you have a right to see them? Obviously, they relate to the direct conversations with the president, which raises executive privilege issues. And if you do have a right to see them, that would mean that future Republican Senates could also seek the same kind of paper from future Democratic presidents. Can you walk us through how you think through those issues?
Well, I think we should see all of the documents, all of them. This is too important for us not to have access to all of the evidence that would be available. I do think it's important that we deconflict the congressional investigations with the FBI investigation, because obviously they are looking at criminal matters in terms of what they investigate. We are looking at conduct and policy matters. I think we've got to see all of it. I have been really disciplined about this because I was trained as a young prosecutor to be very disciplined about this. I'm not going to reach any conclusions until I see the documents, until I see sworn testimony, till I read sworn testimony. And once that happens, then I think we're going to be in a better position to really judge whether or not this president has gone over the line. We do know he's exercised bad judgment as it relates to calling people and asking them to shut down investigations in terms of the reporting that we have so far. But we don't know whether or not that conduct goes beyond bad judgment at this point. And I think we've got to be carefully looking at the evidence before we reach any conclusions.